Okay.
Took the step now.
Okay. And just...
Oh, my.
Well, use the chair. Oh, you are?
I hope.
How you doing?
Oh, man.
You okay?
Oh, jeez.
Okay.
That knee did not.
Cool. Think of it as rehab. Okay.
What choice
well,
to...
sit back then. Sit back.
He told me not to sit back.
Well, sit back so I can do my intro.
Oh.
Everyone's trying to get into the act. I'm Chad Stanley, the host of the Literary Talk Show.
You are.
Are we ready to go, gentlemen?
Yeah, I've been rolling. Should I re-roll the intro music?
Yeah.
It's right on top of things.
Very much so.
Okay.
There's somebody did that last time, and it's kind of cool, though. You know, I like that kind of effect.
Oh, we can work with it.
Somebody give me a signal. Good evening, and welcome to the Literary Talk Show. My name is Chad Stanley, host of the Literary Talk Show. We do this crazy thing when we feel like it. Our first show was July the 15th, 17th, something like that, in the middle of a hot, dastardly summer. And now the wind is whipping around outside, it's cold as hell, and frankly, we're not going to take it anymore. So we decided to have a talk show. Why the hell not? We've got some big-time guests coming up tonight here at the Literary Cafe. Some people, well, each of them with a story to tell. My first guest is none other than the beloved founder and commissioner for life, Silent Season Rotisserie League, better known to me as Mr. Baseball. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Rob Dutton.
Mr. Baseball, that's a lot to live up to. Isn't that Euchre's official title? Bob Euchre's official title?
Bob Euchre's official title, but I think you deserve the moniker Mr. Baseball.
I'm not nearly as funny, but...
You deserve it because you're a humble, unassuming man who knows his baseball. That's why you deserve it.
Oh.
Let's talk about the state of baseball. I mean, we've got a local situation here with the Cleveland Indians and wahoo wildness in the streets, as it were. I mean, we had quite a campaign here in '95, as you know.
True.
But let's focus in on the greater aspect of the game, the state of baseball, if you will. We've seen an incredible season here in Cleveland, but such was not the case in the other baseball markets.
True. Basically, the cities that had good baseball seasons were the ones that made it to the playoffs and eventually the World Series. But even Atlanta, who were our opponents in the World Series, had a season-long kind of slump as far as attendance is concerned, and the fans lacked a certain amount of enthusiasm, as even one of their ball players, David Justice, pointed out during the series. There's a certain problem that fans have right now with baseball.
And that lack of enthusiasm stems from?
Several facets. Possibly feeling betrayed by the work stoppage from a year ago. There was a certain problem brewing as far as the perception that how overpriced the players are, how overpaid they seem to be. And also there isn't really good baseball in a lot of places.
There's a variety of villains in all of this. There's the rich, greedy, overpaid players. Paid even more than me, Chad Stanley, host of the Literary Talk Show. Paid quite a bit more than me. Of course, there's the greedy owners of the baseball teams. Two evil individuals, two evil factions, if you were. And it's basically, in the eyes of the fan, it's difficult to take sides in all of this. I remember a day in the not-too-distant past when baseball had a commissioner, a go-between, as it were, a third party that saw to it that the integrity of the game was maintained, and that's not the case anymore.
Well, that was the illusion that the owners wanted to create by having a commissioner, at least at that time. The commissioners has always worked at the pleasure of the owners. There wasn't the original first commissioner, Kennesaw Landis, was appointed by the owners.
Mountain Landis.
Kennesaw Mountain Landis, yes. Was appointed by the owners. Every commissioner since then has been appointed by the owners and works at the pleasure of the owners. His contract can be, as it turns out, we learned with Fay Vincent.
Well, let me ask you something now.
The commissioner can be fired at almost any time.
Well, let me ask you something. The lack of a commissioner, then, you're telling me on the surface that it doesn't matter. Basically, he's a mouthpiece for the owners, so what?
Well, at least it was some countervailing force that worked between the owners and the players, and actually helped the fans to some degree. Mm-hmm. And that presence, even though the appearance was that it was stronger than it really was still some kind of strength.
Not totally impartial, but impartial enough to maintain an even keel.
Have some value.
Now, most people that I know are Republicans, which is one strike against them, I suppose. And most people that I know came down strongly on the side of the owners during the work stoppage.
Sure.
They were like, rich ball players playing a kid's game, they don't deserve these millions of dollars contract. Your take on that?
Well, it's easy to see that because the players had to take the first proactive step that was apparent to the public.
Yeah.
Whereas what had happened was that there were many things that the owners had done up to that point that left the players with no other choice but to strike. Now, whether you're fundamentally on the side of the owners or the players, the fact is that the owners took so many steps that to that point, saying they were going to implement their last offer, which the players did not want to have and had no choice but to say, okay, if that's the way it's going to be, we'll strike so that doesn't get implemented.
So in essence, there's no bargaining going on there.
And that was true, and that's what the courts found. That's what the National Labor Relations Board eventually found, and the court upheld that the owners had bargained in bad faith.
All right.
But the players have still taken the hit as far as taking the blame for that work stoppage, where that was the last card they had to play.
Exactly.
Now, as far as them being greedy and overpriced, I do question that a little bit, because there's no contract that any baseball player ever got that some owner didn't say, yeah, I'll sign that too.
And so as long as someone is paying you a check, you're getting paid market value. The market value constitutes me giving you $10 for this appearance. Mm-hmm. That's your market value.
That's what I'm willing to accept at this point. And
which constitutes market value.
Right. That changes, and it's a little synthetic. The whole free agency arbitration system is a little synthetic because of how and what the owners and the players originally agreed to back in the 70s in their first collective bargaining agreement. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to that. There's a real sordid history of labor relations between the players and the owners that have brought this to this point.
Which, if you saw the Ken Burns baseball special,
you hardly learned anything about that from that piece.
Well, no, I beg to differ with you on that.
Compared to all of what has gone on, Burns only scratched the surface. I loved and admired that.
I'm looking at it as a bit of gloss, a bit of a light-hearted romp through the history of baseball, if you will, and it focused on a lot of the labor trouble in the game in the early part of the 20th century. The whole idea of work stoppages, the whole idea of unions, the whole idea of rival leagues was brewing in the early moments of the game.
And Burns barely touched on it. There was nothing about him to organize
exactly
other things and come up with some kind of equitable situation.
But again,
baseball players from the inception of professional baseball
right.
to about the mid-'70s always made a lot of money relative to the average population.
Correct.
They always made between 6 and 7 times what the average wage earner made out there in the general population. Well, with the advent of this new that occurred in the mid-'70s to date, that's been constantly escalating. Although this year there's something kind of interesting. This year's shares for the victors of the World Series is going to be about approximately $207,000 apiece. And interestingly enough, 6 of the Atlanta Braves, who will collect those full shares, that will more than double what they actually made as baseball players this year. And several of them were key players in this World Series.
Do you remember the old days when a player was voted the most valuable player of a playoff series, World Series? They would get a Chevy Impala.
Oh, it was
as
a
their
Corvette.
award.
Oh, it was a Corvette. From
I
the
remember,
sporting
I
goods.
don't even remember the sports car. I remember your standard stock variety home, around the neighborhood suburban mall type of vehicle. A vehicle was a vehicle, and that's what they got, 68 and 69. Then I think they started sprucing the cars up in the mid-'70s. But I may be wrong, and you're Mr. Baseball, and I'll acquiesce to your
About the
to your
time that they
opinion.
started handing out the cars, they were handing out Corvettes.
Okay, now
for
let's,
that MVP.
Rob, if we can, let's get serious. What's the whole point
Why?
of a
This is
collective...
baseball.
Well, exactly. What's the
Okay.
point of a collective bargaining agreement anyway? I mean, a lot of people have soured on the game. Granted, not people in Cleveland, but if I were living in, let's say, 13 miles southwest of El Paso, I really wouldn't give a damn about Major League Baseball right now. What's the whole point behind a collective bargaining agreement?
The point behind that
If you will.
is just to stabilize the game, stabilize the professional end of the game. Let people, let things get on and get settled for next season, so that the game can go on and be played at the level that we're used to.
Rob, what do you say to those people, those poor unfortunates that root for the Houston Astros? Here's a team that is a heartbeat away from being moved to Northern Virginia. And the Pittsburgh Pirates came within a hair of being moved to Northern Virginia. Those are distressed franchises. What do you propose to remedy that situation?
The big picture is to get people back in the seats, get people used to going to baseball games again. And one of the most convenient ways I've thought of to do that is to offer time-sensitive pricing on the tickets.
Please tell me more about
Much
this.
in the
It
way-
sounds like a wacky idea.
Well, they've been doing it in New York for Broadway shows for a long time. That the day of the show, the seats that are unsold for certain shows get thrown back out into the ticket market, and at half price. And maybe baseball could even go one better. That on the noon at the day of that particular game, if it's a night game, the
Box
tickets
seat goes for
down,
$14.
that would normally go for $14
Would now be $10
or
$12.
$7 or something
Right,
like that,
right.
and that the price would be lower. Now they're saying, "Oh, we can't do this, because of all the complications." Well, all these tickets are printed on the computer anyway. What difference does it make?
That's true. We
Don't
do
know.
live in a computer age.
Yes, we do. It would make it very easy to account for the money, and it would put people back in the seats. Where maybe even at game time, a box seat, if it's still available, might go for as little as $2. Something like that.
So I see a day, perhaps when we have 45,000 screaming alcoholics in the Astrodome who paid $2 for their tickets. That's better than nothing
Well, I
at
think
all.
we ought to keep the beer prices pretty high still, but yeah, we remember on Nickel Beer Night. That's
All right, very good. We've covered a lot.
I have one other idea that I like. The most serious thing about what distresses baseball is that we're losing a whole generation of fans. The kids of this day and age are
The children,
the
if you will.
children. They're not able to participate in watching baseball, particularly on television or listening to it even on radio, because of the hour at which the games are played. And I can recall when I was 12 years old that we were sneaking radios into school, or we even had a teacher who snuck a TV in so we could watch part of the series.
Right.
Because they were day games. And it's nice to know that the new contracts with TV will allow.
In essence, you're talking about the Baseball Network having a World Series game starting at 8:30.
Well,
Very difficult to keep it
that
on
was
the
that
hour.
was that was the whole concept of that baseball network was probably
blind
pretty
greed, if you will.
Ill-conceived, at least.
Okay. I want to touch also on rotisserie baseball, and we're going to take a little break right now. And when we come back, We're going to talk about the wild, wonderful world of rotisserie baseball. Little intro music, if you shall. We've got some big guests coming up just in a little bit. We've got the one and only Nick Riff, psychedelic cowboy extraordinaire. He'll be our next guest here at the Literary Cafe Talk Show. We'll be right back with Rob. Don't go anywhere. Ciao.
That would.
It's pretty good.
Really?
And cut! Give us a countdown. Spongi Cabaret, ladies and gentlemen. A round of applause for the studio band here tonight. Spongi Cabaret, fin de siècle ensemble. They'll be coming back later on in the show here at the Literary Cafe, weaving their rich musical tapestry. Right now, we're back with beloved founder and commissioner for life, Silent Season Rotisserie League. I call him Mr. Baseball, the one and only Rob Dutton. Hi, Rob. Good to have you on the show again. Well, we took a break, so now you're
right.
back
It's again.
on
Okay, I can see how that works.
Right now, we're not going to talk about the ugly world of professional sports. I mean, real life, blood, sweat, and tears out on the baseball diamond. We know all about that. We went through the World Series. We lived and died every night. It was, as you know, was a little too much for me to bear. In fact, at one point I had to get up and walk out of your house. I couldn't handle it anymore.
You left the room.
I left the room. Let's talk about something much brighter and cheerier. Rotisserie baseball. Fantasy baseball. Based on real life, yet it's not. Embellish rotisserie baseball for us, if you shall.
Well, first of all, let's explain what rotisserie baseball, or where that name came from.
Good.
The fellows that created this game, and it's just a game like Monopoly or Scrabble. And maybe it's a little bit more like Dungeons and Dragons, because it's a fantasy game that you involve a little bit of reality and try to play with things that are going on. Mm-hmm. But rotisserie, the reason that was called that is because of the name of the restaurant that the game was founded in.
That's the only reason.
That's it. There was a restaurant in New York City that these guys met at regularly called La Rotisserie Française, and they just called it rotisserie baseball. So many people think, well, what do you do? Sit around, the old barbecue, and how does that work?
Yeah.
It's fantasy baseball. What you do is a group of people get together, select teams comprised of players from major league rosters, collect their statistics in certain categories that they all agree upon, and the one that amasses the most points and having the highest standings wins.
I'm sure that the rise of personal computers have added to the world of rotisserie baseball, simply because crunching all that information can be quite time-consuming and tedious.
Oh, it is, and the computers help immensely with getting that out.
So what's the state? We've talked about the real-life essence of professional sports. A lot of people not too happy about it, but rotisserie baseball, on the other hand, seems to be enjoying.
It's thriving. It's just thriving because it's played outside of the context of what's going on, that affects the game. We don't have to worry about whether a team is going to move, because if that team moves, those players still remain ours.
Exactly.
We don't have to worry about it.
If a player is convicted of selling cocaine and child molestation, the only thing that you and I are concerned about is that he play out the rest of the season.
Well, just because I've had Steve Howe and Luis Polonia on my rosters, men guilty
Luis
of
Polonia
those.
is very good for stolen bases, by the way. Now,
And not so good for 14-year-old girls.
exactly. I may add right now that a lot of people are watching this repartee, this give and take between you and I, and wondering, Chad, what's the big deal? I thought this was a talk show that would appeal to everyone. They still don't understand what numbers we're adding up or just what the deal is. Give us the 8 categories that we tally up.
The 8 categories are on the offensive side, composite batting average of the team, total home runs, total runs batted in, and total stolen bases. On the pitching side, it's total wins, total saves, a ratio which is called hits plus walks divided by innings pitched, or how many. That's the formula that comes out. And finally, earned run average, which is how many average earned runs a pitcher gives up in the course of 9 innings.
I see. What type of ball player would you consider a blue chip rotisserie baseball player? Give me an idea. Either a pitcher or a hitter.
Well, ideally, you try to find somebody that scores high in as many categories as possible.
A triple threat, as it were.
Triple or quadruple threat. There are some that are very proficient. A few years ago, Jose Canseco was a 4-category player. Fairly high batting average, fairly close to 300, a lot of home runs, a lot of RBIs, and over 30 stolen bases. And he was a 4-category player. Now the most you can really look at is maybe grabbing a blue chipper in 3 categories.
On the pitching side of things.
On pitching and also on hitting. The real burners, the stolen base guys, don't tend to hit for a real high average, and they also don't tend to have a lot of power. So you lose something somewhere. It's a give and take. And you try to assign some sort of value to these players and select them based on that. And the way the players are selected are when that group of owners gets together in the spring.
And there is a finite budget.
Right.
Now
a salary cap, if you will.
A salary cap, if you will. And this adds an intriguing
element.
I was looking for another word.
Je ne sais quoi.
Another word. An intriguing twist, if you will, towards the game. You have to bid within your means. Now,
all of that just to get to bid within your means.
Exactly, yes. Well, it takes time for me, but through the magic of editing, it'll look like I came up with it just like that. Let's move along here. The world of baseball, the real world, blood, sweat, and tears on the baseball diamonds, vis-a-vis the computer baseball rotisserie world. How do the two complement each other? If I'm a rotisserie baseball player, how does that affect my enjoyment of my local team, be it the Brewers, the Tigers, or the Marlins?
It may not enhance your enjoyment because you may not have too many of your own hometown players on your team, and if you have, unfortunately, if you have pitchers that are on your own team and you go to see the game and one of your pitchers from your fantasy baseball team is also your hometown pitcher and he goes out there and he gets shelled, you tend to get real depressed and drink a lot more beer.
Well, that's a side benefit there. Let me just close up this interview segment with a request, basically, for an old story. Now, I know I'm speaking out of school here, but Rob has hands-on experience in the world of Major League Baseball. You were actually a clubhouse boy, a clubhouse assistant in the 70s, the glory years, if you will, for the Tribe, when they wore those attractive...
the fire engine red.
Red uniforms.
Yeah, Boog Powell was amazing in that.
There's an old story that I would appreciate if you can share with everyone here today about the legendary manager of the Milwaukee Brewers, Del Crandall, if you will.
Gee, I really don't know how to share that story in any real elegant way.
Okay, let's cut the camera here, and we'll be back after this break. All right, it's cool. We're off the camera now. Tell me, what's this Del Crandall story? What's that all about? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me the
Just
story.
do it.
Del Crandall. I mean, they call him low balls Crandall. What's all that about?
Well, that could be one of the things. I'd really rather not do this.
Do it. Go ahead.
No. I can, it's just, it's not a funny, it's really not that.
It's a great story. Oh, well,
Have
sad to say
have I
we've
ever
hit
actually told you that story?
Yes, you have.
Oh, have I?
Yes.
I must have been pretty drunk.
All right. Well, sadly, on the speed bump of life, we have reached the end of this interview
How about
segment.
the Carl Yastrzemski story?
I never heard the Carl Yastrzemski story.
Now, you see, there's something new. Pretty funny.
Would you be
Sure.
willing to
it
share
involves,
that with
it
our
involves
audience?
Tim McCarver, too, which was
All right.
interesting.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back from our break, and let's please welcome this story of Carl Yastrzemski. A round of applause from this dead audience. Come on, let's have some applause here. Thank you. Tell us about Carl Yastrzemski, if you will.
I wonder if anybody besides you and me here know who Carl Yastrzemski is. Anyway.
Show of hands.
A couple. Good. Excellent. Excellent. In 1975, when I was working down there, we had to take care of the ball players, and sometimes after a game, some would go out and leave the clubhouse and go out for the evening. But one night, 4 of them decided to stick around and play some cards, and it became a really unique experience to watch 4 grown men. One of whom was a legend whose space was already picked out in Cooperstown, sit around in their underwear for several hours, playing bridge and drinking lots of scotch.
A little soundtrack
To the
music.
point of,
A little soundtrack music for this, please. Go ahead.
To the point of really unable to control themselves, yet they continued to play cards. At one point, Mr. Yastrzemski, who couldn't even get up from his chair to go take care of
Business.
little personal business, just turned to one side and put a knuckle upside his nose and blew it out. At which point Tim McCarver was playing cards with him, roars with laughter and points at him and goes, "And this is an idol to half the flipping kids in New England?" And shortly after that, the card game broke up, and Yastrzemski then proceeded to york all over the back seat of one of the other clubhouse people's car who was trying to take him back to the hotel. It was a really great scene. But
that is an excellent story.
But of course, he wound up in the World Series that year. Yeah, well, that was better than the other one.
Maybe it's just me.
That was so lame.
Well, it was slightly lame, but it kind of brought me back. I felt as if I was reliving an element of the Ken Burns baseball documentary.
It was the music.
We had the music in the background. All we needed was that chump that used to do the Prairie Home Companion.
Garrison Keillor.
Yeah, we could have used him doing the voiceover, no offense. But still, you told an excellent story. I'd like a round of applause here for Rob Dutton, beloved founder and commissioner for Life Silent Season Rotisserie League, otherwise known as Mr. Baseball. When we come back, we'll have the one and only psychedelic cowboy, Nick Riff. Let's have a little outro music, if you will. I'd also like to welcome John McAndrews on the trumpet. He's helping out the Sponge Eye Cabaret tonight. We got some great guests coming up later on. My name's Chad Stanley. We are the Literary Talk Show. Be with you in a bit. Ciao.
Until we're clear, yeah. It was lame.
It had a charm to it. It had charm to it. Del Lowballs Crandall.